Hello, Herkimer County. This is Michele Hummel with the Herkimer County Chamber of Commerce. We're here today with Assemblyman Robert Smullen. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And we also have Dave Warner, our producer.
Oh, you're not going to forget me again, huh?
I forgot him last week. Halfway through the podcast, I'm like, what is missing? And I realized it was Dave.
Yeah. Dave is unforgettable.
Yes.
It was she was missing the humor because then I couldn't cut in.
Right. Hey, I refer to him affectionately as Dave the Save.
Yeah.
Phone a friend when you need one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, welcome. And you are Assemblyman for the 118th District. Can you explain to our listeners where that is?
Absolutely. So I've been in office now. This is my fourth year in office. I was first elected in 2018, reelected in 2020. And the 118th Assembly District is 5 counties. All of Fulton County, the upper part of Herkimer County, 6 towns in Oneida County, all of Hamilton County, and 9 towns in St. Lawrence County. Geographically, it's the biggest assembly district in New York State. All of them have the same amount of people, about 130,000 people. But this one is actually the biggest one.
Wow.
Sure.
Wow.
You've got a lot of mileage happening there.
A lot of mileage, but it's good. It's 46 towns, 13 villages, 2 small cities. And it's the upper Mohawk Valley in the west half of the Adirondacks, if you're thinking about it in geography sort of thing. So it's a big rural district, 26 school districts, lots of great people. It's been a real honor to represent it.
I will say you've been a great supporter of the Herkimer County Chamber. We appreciate that. You attend a lot of our events and our ribbon cuttings. It's really nice to have an actual face to the name and you present. So
My wife said he's everywhere. She saw him in a couple of pictures. And
He
she said
truly
he's
is.
everywhere.
Yeah. You wonder. And then I look on Facebook and he was with us in the afternoon. I'm like, how did he get there so fast?
Sometimes I wish I had the Star Trek, teleporter thing. But I drive a lot. But it's good because you get out and you get to see people, you get to know what they're thinking. You get to know what their ideas are on policy. You get to know what they're thinking about what's going on in public affairs. And that's really the reason that I do it. Besides the representation in Albany, which is, you go down there and you vote on the 1,000 or so bills we do every year in Albany in the legislative session. I'm also on 5 different committees: the Environmental Conservation Committee, the Higher Education Committee, the Banks, the Social Services Committee, and importantly for the Chamber of Commerce and for maybe many of the listeners that own or run their own businesses, on the Economic Development Committee. So I'm looking after how, what's the future of New York State going to look like from an economic perspective, and doing my very best to make sure that the voice of the Mohawk Valley is heard in that process.
Great. And so what can you tell us about the future of our economic? Can you explain what's going on in those committees, or especially regarding business?
Well, especially in the business community, a lot of it happens through the Mohawk Valley Regional Economic Development Committee, which is headquartered out of the Mohawk Valley, and then it gets put into the policy process in Albany, through the governor's office, and then in the legislature. Then we go through and we look at all the various things, and then we during the time, especially during the budget time, we actually end up voting on what a lot of those resources where they go and where they come from.
Well, one thing in particular it's recent in the news is the farmers. So the state just passed legislation about overtime over 40 hours instead of 60 hours. So just to back that up a little bit, to explain to everybody, I think it's always been no overtime for farm laborers. And in 2020, they passed a bill that said anything over 60 hours needs to be overtime. And now it's going to be anything over 40 hours is going to be overtime. So for, the average person looking in, hey, that's a great thing, quality of life. You want to make sure you're treating your workforce well. However, it's difficult for farmers to absorb that cost because now you're looking at several $1,000s a month more in payroll, and that means, hey, we can't buy this tractor, or we're not going to be able to reinvest in technology, and they have to try to offset it. And as we know, the cost of whole milk is state regulated, so it's not like they can just say, let's increase the gallon of milk for $1 a piece or something to help offset it. So can you elaborate a little bit more on this, and where do you stand?
Yeah, this is a very troublesome development. The law was passed, as you said, and it's taken several years. It's actually the wage board that's headed by the labor commissioner that recently made the decision to lower the threshold from 60 down to 40 hours. And unfortunately, that's going to make New York non-competitive with many of the regional states having to do from a farming perspective. And as you mentioned, it is important to mention to all your listeners, farmers are price takers, not price makers. The feds actually set the cost of per hundredweight for dairy. And it's then it becomes a race to who has the most inputs and then getting capital and being able to deploy it. And it's very hard for farmers because this decision will make them less competitive in the regional environment. And I'll give you for instance, when you previously said that farmers didn't have caps on the amount of hours that workers could work, it's what the workers would want to work is how to look at it. So this is in the harvest season, you have to get things done. You have a lot of legal immigrants that come here from other countries to work just for the season. They work here and then they go home to their home countries for the balance of the year. And they want to work as much as possible. Their goal is to come here is to make money and then to be able to go home and live their lives in their home countries. And
away from our winter.
Away from the winter, that's right. Yeah. So if you're from Central America, you come up here in the summertime, you work a lot. The more you work, the better it is. But when you lower the overtime threshold, first from 80 to 60, and then now from 60 to 40, and it's going to be phased in, and there are going to be tax credits that farmers are going to be able to apply for. But it makes it very hard for our farmers to compete. Almost no farmer that I've talked to, and they're almost all small business people, from an economic perspective, were in favor of lowering this threshold. None of the workers were, but it was something that because of the way things work in Albany with one-party rule, is that's what we got. And now we're going to have to adjust to it. And it's going to be a very difficult adjustment. And I think you'll see, unfortunately, is a lot of small businessmen, farmers, decide that they could do something else besides have to work this unwieldy system of tax credits, to be able to try to get the money back that they're going to now have to pay in additional overtime costs during the harvest season.
Right. Well, a lot of Democrats have come out against it. So, it's not all of them. I've seen a couple of press releases come out, and they're going, no, this is not right.
Yeah, there was definitely bipartisan opposition to this. But the way the progressives work in New York City and the way that they dominate the legislature and the committees, it's unfortunate. But it was first voted into a law, and then it was given to a wage board, and now it's been given to the labor commissioner, and I'm pretty sure that she's going to lower it to 40, and then overtime will be paid on top of that, and then hopefully the farmers can get it back in tax credits. But that's not a good signal to the agriculture community from my perspective. I would prefer that it be done transparently, so all the players in the agriculture field, whether it's another state's farmers or our own farmers, that we know what it is to make things competitive, and then we allow our farmers to compete in the market.
Right, and tax credits, they don't necessarily help with cash flow because you don't know if it's going to be once a year or quarterly or biannually either.
And sometimes it can lag significantly. So like you say, there could be a cash flow gap. And, we know our farmers, especially when they have to capitalize new equipment, it can be a very tough environment for cash flow for farmers because you have to buy stuff, but then it's a long time before, that growth period and then the product actually comes to market. So it's like you say, it's a tough one.
And isn't it possible that some of these, maybe they cap it at 40 hours and they hire more people, and then really it's the laborers that are going to be losing out because they're not getting as many hours as they would have liked, and perhaps they'll go to another state.
Yeah, that's the fear. These are hardworking people. They come here. They want to work. They want to work as much as they can during the season that they're here. So they may choose to go to other states. And we're in a labor shortage right now. People don't want to work for the wages that are there. So it's going to drive prices up as a result of that.
Right. So that's why it's so important for our listeners to pay attention to these things and be concerned about them, because as we go through the grocery store, clearly our grocery bills are much higher than they've been in the past already. And I think it's significantly going to go up if this continues.
I definitely think it will. We've got a lot of inflation right now. All the indicators is that it's persistent. I think I'd heard as of yesterday that the Fed is considering raising interest rates again because of a couple positive reports that show that the job market remains strong. So I expect to see inflation continuing for the foreseeable future. And again, when you're causing costs to go up for, in this case, an essential area of our economy, agriculture. Everyone's got to eat. No farms, no food.
Right.
That it's going to raise prices even further, which is going to cause the average consumer to take notice.
As far as the inflation, what's your take on, the way we all learned it in school, inflation means 2 quarters of negative growth. And now it seems as though the government is, kind of trying to change what the definition is.
Move the goalpost.
So is New York State trying to spin it the way the federal government is trying to spin it?
Well, they absolutely are, and it's because of the same bad budgeting practices that have gone on in the state level. Let me give you, for instance. Since I first got into the state assembly just 4 years ago, the state budget has gone from $170 billion to $220 billion.
Jeez.
Much of it in the last 2 years on basically borrowed federal money that's coming down from the federal government to pay for coronavirus relief. And we've at the federal level, we've borrowed trillions of dollars, which is part of the reason that inflation is kind of taking off, and why it didn't get contained is because when you borrow money from yourself to pay for things that you don't need to close budget gaps, it causes turbulence in the economy. And that's what like you said, 2 quarters of negative growth technically puts us in a recession by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, textbook.
We're in a recession, but it's a different one than we've ever seen before because the jobs market is still strong.
So what other points should we be, as far as the job market goes? It's very difficult to find people to fill positions, and I wondering if part of that is because of New York State increasing the minimum wage, which, yes, again, it's great for the quality of life. However, when you can, either be, let's say, a truck driver for $15 an hour, or you could go work at McDonald's, obviously you're going to go work at McDonald's because it's the easier thing to do, and you're left with many companies struggling to fill positions. And truck drivers is just off the top of my head. I think it's spread more wide than that. But is there any type of, any type of reprieve in the future for businesses?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. The progressive mantra is that, they can control prices, they can control wages. They're proving it with the Farm Labor Wage Board. They're proving it with their budgetary processes, which New York is like the most generous state when it comes to social services. Mm-hmm. It's a fact. We spend twice as much per capita as Texas does. We spend twice as much per capita as Florida does. We spend twice as much per capita as California does.
Wow, didn't know that.
On our budgeting process. And a lot of it has to do with a lot of social services and the policy. So we've actually, in New York, we've doubled down on this in the past few years since I've been in the Assembly. And that regulatory environment, that top-down, centrally directed economy, has been proven time and time again in the past, especially in Europe, that it doesn't work as efficiently or as effectively as it's claimed to do. And that's why, I always vote for pro-business sorts of things. I did want to share that I was recently given a 100% rating by the National Federation of Independent Businesses for my voting on such things, which to me is a point of pride because it's the small businesses, in this case, in our assembly district, that are the ones that are the backbone of the economy.
That's wonderful. Good. That's great. You know what? On that note, I do think we need to break right now, so we'll be back in 1 minute.
Visit My Little Falls and stay connected with the latest news, information, and events in the city and the area. Our mission is to generate interest in the community and connect residents in a more meaningful way by facilitating deeper conversations about how these stories will shape the future of the Mohawk Valley. Join thousands of weekly visitors who stay up to date with feature stories, interviews, videos, our event calendar, and print publication, the Mohawk Valley Express. It's about timely local news for the community, keeping citizens informed about important issues, telling about the people who live and work here, and giving locally owned businesses the opportunity to reach a very targeted audience of locals and tourists alike. It's a whole new form of media-rich content developed specifically for today's mobile lifestyle and listeners. You can download our iOS app in the iTunes Store, listen to our country music streaming radio station, or sign up for a weekly newsletter. Stop by today at myvalleyfalls.com. You'll be glad you did.
I asked about the guns. We're back.
You're right. Yeah. No delay on that one, Michelle.
No,
Come
not
on.
at all. Usually I'm talking over the music or who knows what. But
You did accidentally, but
oh, well, welcome back. I'm glad you didn't hear anything foul. How about that? So we're back with Assemblyman Robert Smullen, and we've been talking about inflation. I want to switch gears just a little bit and maybe talk about the gun regulations that are happening with concealed carry. How is that impacting business? And, what are your thoughts and where do you stand on that topic?
Sure. So we most recently went in for a special session, an extraordinary session on July 1st, and we passed an entire raft of gun control legislation having to do with concealed carry. It was a direct outcome of the Supreme Court decision. Justice Clarence Thomas had issued a 6-3 decision, wrote an opinion for the majority that struck down New York Sullivan's Law, which says that people can conceal carry outside the home in order to defend themselves. And one of the things that was really interesting about the state's reaction is they basically doubled down on saying, no, you can't. And they did that through what's called the sensitive places provision that, historically speaking, if there's a sensitive place like a courthouse, like a polling place, like a state legislature, where you wouldn't want people carrying weapons into because in theory, you could intimidate somebody into doing some public action. Well, those historical reasons for prohibiting firearms have now been extended to the entire state through basically everywhere. Any public place that you can imagine it's prohibited to carry concealed. And in fact, carry any firearm, whether it's a rifle or a shotgun. So what it's essentially done was take what should have been a gift of freedom back to people to be able to defend themselves in public. Now it's actually even more sweeping of a law than the Sullivan Law was, prohibiting concealed carry in New York City and only giving it to a relative few. So how is that actually going to affect businesses? So these days, up until now, in this day and age, people with a concealed carry permit were probably carrying in many of the businesses around our community. And it just wasn't known. It was not prohibited. But what this new law says is that a business owner would have to specifically allow people with a sign or signage saying that it would be okay to concealed carry in their establishment. Elsewise, someone may be subject to a Class E felony for carrying concealed in one of these, one of the 20 areas of sensitive places. So that's the first thing for businesses is they should think about this and make a choice about whether they should put up a small, unobtrusive sign that says concealed carry is welcome, or whether they should do nothing and then essentially prohibit it, or whether it's, as some already do, is say, well, we would prefer that people did not have this thing in our place of business. So that's really the first thing. The second thing is that it's going to affect all of the, at least in this district, there's a lot of gun shops, there's a lot of gun owners. They're all going to be affected by the business transactions that they now would do having to do with firearms, whether it's a pistol that would fall under the previous pistol permit regime, or now, in a law we passed in June, it's prohibited that semi-automatic firearms, rifles, that they be transferred without a license, sort of thing. So it's really these two things. It's going to make a huge difference in the rather brisk business that people that we have firearms in upstate New York.
Right, they're struggling already. I mean, the fact that they can be sued for someone using their gun, that blows my mind just a little bit, because you could easily go after somebody with a knife. You're not going to sue Ginsu. It just
Maybe they will be in Canada. You never know. I mean,
But it's
Well, now that that was another law. So you talk about another law. One was the manufacturer's liability law. That'll directly hurt Remington for sure,
right?
Because it's a death by 1,000 cuts strategy to say we want to drive the gun industry out of New York State, and we want to specifically harm those by saying that they're liable. And that's like saying that Chrysler is going to be responsible for anyone who dies behind the wheel of one of their cars, sort of thing. It doesn't make any sense from a legal standpoint.
But how do they? I mean, they pass it. How does any of this stand up in court? This is insane.
Well,
I'm sorry, I have an opinion.
You talk about court, but the gun legislation is actually headed quickly to court. In fact, there was the Gun Owners of America put in a request for a stay of the law. The judge didn't grant it standing because technically the law hadn't taken effect yet as of September 1st. But now there's other legislation by other good government groups that are challenging it directly. And I'm pretty sure that they're going to be successful based on the language in the law, the language in the Supreme Court decision, and the substance of their legal challenges to it. So for those listening out there, do pay attention and be careful, because the law is in effect. But I have good reason to believe that it's going to be overturned going forward.
How about for the gun owners, though, that are having to deal with all the consequences, like separating ammunition from the weapons into a totally different building? I mean, small businesses, they can't add another building like that just overnight.
They certainly can't, and that's one of the bad things about this law. It's what happens with one-party rule, essentially, is you get what is the sense of, in this case, the representatives from New York City. It gets flipped onto upstate, where we have a very, very different cultural appreciation of firearms and what they mean to our communities. When your response time on average in my district is 20 to 25 minutes for law enforcement to respond to a 911 call, whether it's a homeowner, whether it's a business, whatever the case is, people need to be able to defend themselves. That's really what Justice Thomas meant in the Supreme Court decision.
What about what's the impact on hunters? Because I've heard a lot of talk swirling, but I don't understand what that impact is going to be on them. It
hasn't been fully clear, but there was an exclusion for hunters if you have a hunting license about some of the requirements for possession. But one of the things that was in the bill, which hasn't been defined fully by regulation, is parks. We've got the Adirondack Park to the north of us here, which is 6 million acres of public and private land. And the idea is you're going to prohibit gun possession, carrying concealed on state land. Does it apply to the park? The governor's office says no, but my reading of the law says yes, it does. So I want that to be reviewed by a federal judge.
Great. So let's flip gears again a little bit and talk about the election. What's coming up? I'm hearing that, there's so much going on with different elections, but I'm hearing that Zeldin might be getting a little closer to Hochul in terms of polling. What's your take?
So I just did see that poll recently that he's within 4 points of the governor, and I think that's a good thing. A good competitive race is healthy for democracy, to get your ideas out there, to make sure that the people in the marketplace of ideas, they know what they're voting for, and that's really been the case in this election. So at the governor's level, there's a big race. There's also big races at the state senate and the assembly level, where I think it's very likely that my party will pick up several seats and get over that veto-proof majority sort of thing. So that's a big thing. A lot of it was thrown up in the air with redistricting. That was the most recent thing. It's a census requirement that every 10 years that redistricting happen. It did happen this year, but it was subject to not one, but two, but now 3 different lawsuits. God. So it changed very quickly.
It changed your district too, didn't it?
It did change no, it didn't change it much, but it will in the future, because there was a subsequent lawsuit that's going to have new districts in 2024. So it's like anything else. But But I think the result of it is that New York is going to keep many more Republican Congress people. And that's a good thing for the New York congressional delegation. And in turn, that may be what makes the Republicans take back the House of Representatives and get some real balance in government in Washington, D.C. That's what we need in Albany. That's certainly what we need in Washington, D.C.
My goodness, yes. Yeah, there's
just as the framers of the Constitution, intended, that there be checks and balances and that government work for the people.
Yeah, there's so much rhetoric. It's amazing to me when I listen. I try to listen to both sides. I do, but it's amazing because when you listen to one side, you realize they're not mentioning key items that are on the other side, and vice versa. They're doing it to each other. So I think it's important for all of our listeners, whoever your opinions are, wherever your loyalties may lay, just listen to both sides before you really form an opinion.
That's so very true. And like you said, things have never been so divisive as they are, and they don't have to be. They shouldn't be. But like anything else, in politics and in the political system, it's about having the votes and being able to get your policies across. Elections do matter.
They do. Yes, every vote matters.
Every vote matters.
Yes, that's correct.
We've seen some close races up here. I mean, where a couple of votes, here and there, make a big difference at the local level and up.
Yeah. The biggest question we get is where is my district? What number are we? So that's why when I have everybody on, I try to have you explain exactly what 118 means. What is I just had lunch with 116. So,
right. You're numbering your men now.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Well, just to let everybody know, it was for me the redistricting thing. They took away part of St. Lawrence County and gave me part of Montgomery County. So now I will have, after November, the Mohawk Valley from Tribes Hill all the way to Utica, both the north and the south banks of the Mohawk Valley. It's almost all of Fulton County, 8 towns in Montgomery County, almost all of Herkimer County, all of Hamilton County, and just a couple towns in Oneida County. So for me, the district got a lot more compact, and the issues are that much more important, including agriculture in the Mohawk Valley.
Well, and it's nice that the numbers work out for you with the population, like you were saying, because folks don't realize, Herkimer County is, at least in 2017, there's 44 people per square foot. Whereas if you go to, let's say, Hamilton County,
or square mile, maybe.
Or square mile. Yeah.
We're packed in tight, baby. Come to Herkimer County.
Yeah, even New York is.
We'll be on you in a
not
minute.
That bad. Oh, that's great. But then you get to Hamilton, and it's more like 3. So it's 3 people per square mile, not foot. But so it's nice that your numbers are balancing out because Oneida County is significantly higher than Herkimer County.
It is. It's like I said, I've gotten to know the people in the entire district, and I'm just very lucky and very blessed. Great district with great people, and it's my intention to continue to take their voice to Albany, our voice, our values. And whenever I think about an issue, I think about it as what do most of the people in the district think about this issue, and then I'll get a variety of opinions and call people. And really that's how I think of things, and that's how I vote.
Great. So the average business person, people in our county, they need to know that it's okay to reach out to you. I think a lot of folks look at and I've said this before on this show, a lot of folks don't realize how easy it is to reach out to you when they're having trouble. Maybe it's a liquor license they need assistance with, or it's a new startup company. What types of things can you assist with?
So one of the big things that we did, we're there to help with helping people with problems with state government, essentially. And one of the biggest ones was unemployment insurance during the pandemic. We had several thousand legislative inquiries that we put together that were able to help people get the benefits that they needed and deserved to get them through being forced out of their jobs, essentially, by state mandated closures. But whether it's, like you say, the state liquor authority with a liquor license, whether it's with a department that in government that's non-responsive to their inquiry, whether it's the Attorney General, we're there to help. And anybody can call. I've got an office in Herkimer on Route 5, just in East Herkimer. I've also got a satellite office in Johnstown, as well as an office in Albany.
And what phone number should they call to reach you in Herkimer?
So any of the numbers are there. The general number is actually 518-762-1427. That's that'll ring. It rings at all the offices. So
okay. I see. Yeah, you're very responsive, I will say.
Yeah, I try to be.
Anytime we've reached out, you've been right there, you and your staff as well.
Absolutely.
So, any other things you think we should know about? I always ask this question, and nobody has surprised me yet. But are there any things coming down the pike that we just don't know we should be looking for? Any trends you've identified with all of these calls?
Well, one of the big things that I'm asking people to look out for is next year in the budget, because we're going to have a little problem, a math problem in New York State, and that tax receipts have been up at all levels of government, local, at county, at the state government, at the federal government. But we're going to run out from underneath that, and then there's going to be a reckoning having to do with spending money we don't have on things that we don't need, sort of thing. So I think people should plan ahead a little bit, but I also think that they should be aware that eventually there's going to be a reckoning having to do with the budget in New York and about how much money that we spend.
Yeah, they're going to have to tighten their belts at some point.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know.
Nobody likes to hear that.
It's so true. And I think we haven't even seen the full backlash from the COVID funding. Nothing is free. I was saying it then, but we didn't even have a choice when they wanted to, you've got a daughter, so we're putting $500 in your bank, even if you didn't really need it or didn't want it, that you just had to have it. And then by the way, it's going to catch up with you on your taxes. So
it absolutely will.
Yeah. So anything else? So you want to?
Well, no, I don't know if if any of the people that listen to the program, sort of thing, if there is anything that I can help them with, having to do with running a business or hearing their concerns, they should definitely reach out to me, and that way I'll know, and I'll be glad to meet with them. In fact, right after this, I've got a meeting with a local business person to be able to talk about some issues that they're having in their business, and I'm always available, whether it's during the legislative session or now during this period. Just call and just be able to talk and be able to work out whatever issues you've got.
Great. So thank you so much for joining us. I do want to make mention of a couple of things that are. Sorry, this is glasses time. A couple of things that are coming up. We've got the Bluegrass Festival that will be coming up at Canal Place on the 17th. That's sure to be a good time. The Harbor
sure to be. That's a good. Sure to be a good time.
Sure, it is absolutely.
A boot stomping time.
Bluegrass is good.
Yeah.
Harbor Festival on the 24th in Frankfort, and of course on October 1st we've got the Cheese Festival. So everybody needs to go to the Cheese Festival. You got to love the cheese. And I will give my little plug here. So take a look at this. This is one example of what the Chamber will be there presenting and selling at the Cheese Festival. We have license plate covers available that say Rock City, Little Falls. We also have Little Falls Mountie available. So this is something we're just trying to, diversify a little bit and try. We've noticed that there's just no real souvenirs and things that represent the area. I mean, there are some souvenirs in the area, Dave. I'm sorry about that. He does have certain things, but he doesn't
Our
have.
little store, Little Falls presence, it has Little Falls
if you want
stuff,
a T-shirt and you want a coffee mug, by all means, stop down there and get it. But if you're looking for a license plate cover, come to us.
Don't have those, no.
So just trying to be a little bit different. So I want to thank everybody for your time. And if you have any questions at all on today's broadcast, please call us at 315-866-7820. Have a great day.